Welcome everyone. Thank you for being here, however you're doing that. We have a few items to get through today for our Intergovernmental Committee of the Board of Education for Portland Public Schools. Our first look is at our legislative action in Salem and our priorities there. I think, Courtney, you're going to start us up with a perennial issue, which we have been working on for certainly my whole time of affiliation with this district, 7 years, regarding requirements of the Custodian Civil Service Board, which proves to be, practically speaking, a challenge sometimes and a roadblock in hiring and retention of our own custodians. So can you tell us where we are in trying to address that through policy?
Yeah, so and I'll talk about this one and the next one, and then maybe we can just do a quick update on sort of larger other things, if that makes sense, that are, as it relates to Salem. So the Custodial Civil Service Board is something that we, it's a statute that's been around since the 30s. The way it's written, it only applies to PPS. It does not apply to any other school district in the state. And certainly to your point, Amy, or Director Constam, it has created some barriers to retaining and hiring custodians in the district. And we have a perennial issue of just having a shortage of folks in those ranks. So the bill that we are proposing for this session is pretty small and narrow. Representative Rob Nose is carrying the bill for us. We haven't seen language back yet, but it's been submitted to the Legislative Council to draft. And we're looking at a couple of different things that would change the statute to work for us. One is to remove the residency requirement for board members. We have a really hard time recruiting 3 board members for that board. One of the barriers, of course, is that you have to have lived in the district for 5 years, which is really hard when we got a lot of new talent that comes in and out of the city. So that's one thing. We're going to remove that requirement. And then the other issue is around the exam, the assessment. We are the only district that has to proctor an exam for all incoming custodians. And so we are trying to, I guess I would say, not remove the exam from statute, but work with the language to make it so that we can do an assessment, which is basically an interview, which is normal for hiring. So we are waiting, actually finally heard back from our partners at SEIU today. We're going to set up some time with them later this week to walk through what we're trying to do. We need to get them on board with this in order for this to have a chance, and I think we can get them there. But we just haven't. They've got a lot on their plate. It's the second week of legislative session, so we're glad that they reached back out and are finding time with us.
So those are two minor,
very minor.
Can you?
They're very minor because the wholesale, a wholesale sort of like just get rid of it mentality hasn't worked for us very well in the past. Our labor friends will not go for that. So we're trying to take a small bite at the apple this session and continue to talk about it as we go forward. And there are also, and I don't want to get into the details of bargaining because I'm not the expert on that side of things, but there are a number of things that are relevant to this statute that could be handled through bargaining and wouldn't necessarily need to happen through statute.
Can you tell us, practically speaking, how the second provision of this bill is likely to accelerate our ability to hire or help us in any way retention?
Well, I can give you an example.
The first one doesn't, but
yeah, I can give you an example of. I think the first one does in some ways, because we need 2 people to show up to approve lists, and if we have 3, then maybe we can just meet more regularly because everybody has conflicts. But regardless, on the second point, I think the example that was really telling to me that Frank Levitt shared recently was that out of 17 folks who they brought in for an exam, 6 of them remained. So, I can do math. 11 of the applicants chose to withdraw because they didn't want to take the exam, or they didn't feel that they could pass it. I don't know why. I'll never know. That's, I don't think we do an exit interview or an exit questionnaire when they leave, but it is a barrier to entry, especially because the exam is in English. That's a requirement. And I know that we have recruited folks who, may not be great at speaking English, but can still do the job and do it well.
Well, we should, I mean, first of all, we should make sure that the exam is available in multiple languages. That should be part of this bill.
I can't speak to that, so I don't want to pretend that I know how we do that, but we can certainly get more information from Frank on the process. But and I don't know that we don't offer it that way, but again, I don't want to speak to it. But if 17 people showed up and 6 stayed, that right there tells me that we're not, we're then going to have to go back out and continue to recruit because we haven't filled those slots.
How does our flexibility in being able to proctor this exam improve that situation?
Not having the exam at all.
Oh, I thought you said the second part of our bill.
An assessment, not an exam, right?
So the second part of the exam would be an assessment, not an exam.
Okay, got it. Okay.
Sorry if I wasn't clear. Yeah. The idea is that we're still assessing applicants through an interview process,
right?
But
right.
not proctoring an exam and having that next sort of level barrier would be a huge win for custodians to come to work for us.
So that sounds like that could, remove a lot of the log jams that we're seeing. So just let us know what you need from us in terms of providing support for this in Salem. And then, we should just remind our board, I'm kind of looking at Roseanne Powell a little bit, that when it comes to bargaining with SEIU, we should make sure to address some of the issues in the contract that are sometimes impediments to, our hiring, our ability to hire and keep good candidates.
Absolutely. Thank you. And we'll definitely keep you posted on how this is going.
Ailey, do you have any questions on that or any comments? Okay, let us know what else is going on in Salem and how we can be of service to support our legislative agenda.
Yeah, do you want me to start to move on to the local option? Or do you want to go into a broader update first?
Just a broader legislative update.
Okay, I'll have Lisa go ahead and dig into that, and then we can come back to the local option.
Yes, and I'm going to keep sending these weekly updates to all the board members. So I'll also send this in writing. All of the party caucuses have put out their agendas, which I'll share with you. Unfortunately, none of them call out education in the way we would like to see. I think the Democrats, both on the Senate and House side, are calling out ensuring that schools are making their fiscal investments in an impactful way rather than increasing our fiscal impacts or investments. And then the Senate, both on the Republican senators and the Republican House members, are calling out for more school choice options. And they've also put out some proposals to scale back the corporate activity tax.
Interesting.
So we'll be watching all of their priorities throughout this process.
Is there more specificity in the Democratic proposal about what those sort of accountability earmarks might look like?
No, that's just the high-level language that they're using. So we'll monitor to see if there are specific bills that come out of that in regards to that. And then the House and Senate Education Committees have been meeting. The first week, it was more of an orientation session for new members, but now they're starting to hold public hearings on several bills. And there's a couple that we have waited on. One is up for a hearing this afternoon in House Education. That's House Bill 2739, and it reforms the process for how our state calculates our tentative budget, so the CSL bill, which we're very excited about. It requires the Department of Administrative Services to form a committee, including 4 education-specific members. So,
as opposed to just staff coming up with a number and the legislature accepting it?
Yeah, with a little transparency and information in the process. So we're really excited to see people who have knowledge of the school finance process plugged in and at the table. And it also requires that DAS use the previous biennium's state school fund allocation as the base of the budget. So we're building on previous investments, and then
But these proposals wouldn't come, or will not likely come to bear for the budget that's
not
coming
for
out in a
this
month.
cycle. Yes,
Yeah.
it would be for future bienniums. But we did submit some written testimony on behalf of Superintendent Guerrero for that bill, and then SB 215 was heard in the Senate Education Committee, and that's the summer learning bill. Right now, it's pretty vague language. I think they'll amend in the appropriation. We support, of course, summer learning and funding summer learning. What we want to make sure that they do is make that investment ongoing and continuous. So that's something we're going to call out in our written testimony, which we'll put out. And then next week on Monday, this isn't in an education committee bill, but it's an opioid harm reduction package that Rep. Dexter is championing, and there's like 5 proposals that will be amended in. One aspect is to make naloxone kits more accessible at public entities, including through school districts.
Good.
And then there's also an aspect to shield public school staff from lawsuits and criminal charges if they do administer an opioid antagonist to a student without a parent's permission. If there's an overdose. So that's a package we support, and that will be heard on Monday. I believe they're still getting clarity on the funding, but it will probably come from the opioid settlement dollars. So, yeah, I'll have more bills at the next meeting. So we're still watching as they keep dropping, but.
Yeah, keep us posted and let us know when testimony would be helpful. And also, I know Byrony and the DSC are really interested in mobilizing later in the session to go to Salem and fight for what we need and want. So
Yeah,
keep
we're
us
very
posted.
happy to work with them. We'll probably plan a lobby day
Good.
for students.
Yeah, good. Anything you want to add to that, Courtney?
No, I think that's great. And I think the sentiment right now is that even though it's the halfway through the second week of session, it feels like it's already, the end of February. It's really fast. It always starts so fast. So it's just a lot of, and Lisa's doing a great job tracking what's coming and trying to get ahead of it, but it's hard sometimes to get ahead of it. So things are getting scheduled, and it's a flurry. But we're going to do our best to, stay on top of it and make sure that where there are opportunities, that we loop you in and kind of plug you in, like Lisa said, and then planning for sort of parent and student advocacy opportunities as we move along here. It's a little early for that. It's more meaningful later on as budget conversations heat up.
Haley, you got anything? All right. Okay, let's move on to the local option.
Okay. So didn't think we were going to have to do another local option bill 5 years after the last one, but here we are. So as we've talked about before, and the quick synopsis is that the statute, there is a cap in statute that says if a district raises beyond the cap, collects more local option dollars above that cap, that the money goes back to the state school fund for distribution to all 197 districts. Which is not what we want. We want Portland dollars to stay in Portland, and so do our voters. And so we realized, thanks to Carol Samuels and others at Piper Sandler, that we're getting pretty close again. And so we want to try to lift that cap once more to allow us to keep local dollars here locally. And so we're working with Representative Sanchez to introduce a bill that would lift that cap to $3,500 per ADMW. Right now it's 2,000, and also increase the percentage. There's 2 options. The lower of those 2 is what is used. Generally, it is a per ADMW number, but occasionally, if something wacky happens, it could be the percentage of the state school fund grant. So we're also raising that number just to make sure that we're in the clear. That number is a number that is based on the $3,500 per ADMW number is a number that's based on the sort of enrollment projections and collection projections, and would feel like a good number to get us through like the next 15 years. But I want to be really clear, that is assuming that the rate stays the same, that our local option rate stays the same. If there is, and I know there is conversation about what to do as we look ahead to the, potentially November of 23 local option election, we need to make a decision as a district, and the board needs to make this decision about whether or not they're going to, you all are going to pursue a rate increase, because if that's the case, we would want to lift that number higher to allow for more room. I don't know I don't know yet what pushback we may get for any of this. In the past, it was done pretty, I don't want to say quietly, people read bills, they know what the impacts are, but I would say that this was looked at as a technical fix last time. I think if we get into some of these larger numbers, it may not be looked at that way again.
Yeah.
So I just want to be really clear that the bigger number we get to, it's just going to be maybe a different conversation, and I mean a larger conversation, right? Because we are shoring up our budget in a way, where we're relying on our local voters to do that, where the state can't come through.
Right.
And so, while grateful for all that the state does for school districts, it's not enough. And so we have to pass local options, and we're able to in Portland. So this is it's a good bill. It's not going to, the local option levy collections are what they are. We're making more room, a higher ceiling, so that we can keep them locally. But right now, we're not, if we increase the rate, we would maximize that. We would just get more from the local option. And that's a totally different conversation than this one, but they're related.
Did we sufficiently determine that there would be no appetite for just getting this out of state statute altogether? Because I mean, as responsible legislators, we try not to have things that affect only, one entity or a few entities, even though the previous thing that we just talked about also affects only one entity.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just bad policy. So, but we determined that would be too much of a push. I
think none of this is a done deal. These are hard conversations around school finance. I actually think removing the cap altogether is a great idea. It's just about appetite. And I think there are some that would say, well, then you're just trying to, Portland gets everything and you're just going to have all this money. And it's actually not the case. We have to get our voters to vote for it.
Right.
We would have to they would have to support it. So,
and it's not a zero sum game. It doesn't take anything from anyone else in the state.
No. And we still have, our local option dollars and local property taxes still have an equalization formula where there's a shared, share some love kind of formula in the state school fund. And so it's just because other local jurisdictions can't pass levies doesn't mean we shouldn't be able to increase ours if we want to.
Right. Okay, well, keep us posted, and it's nice
so
to
I
know
that
that Representative Sanchez is championing this. I hadn't heard who was picking up that responsibility after Barbara Smith Warner's departure, so that's great. She's a wonderful advocate. She
was, and I'm also really happy to have Rep Sanchez on board with this. She obviously represents Northeast Portland and many of our schools. I think the other piece that we're looking at, and Lisa's just got it on our calendar today, we're going to meet with Representative Nathanson next week, and she's the long chair of the Revenue Committee, and she really understands this stuff. And I think that will be another opportunity for us to say, hey, is this doable if we just lift it all together? Yeah, good. So we'll keep you posted on what we hear from her. She may say that's a terrible idea, it's never going to fly, or she may say, we should really have a wholesale conversation about this. Yeah. Good. And okay. Anything else there, Ailey? Okay.
I just think, I really want us to repeal the cap. I think with what we know is coming budget wise, and what we hope to be able to do for our students, this is a barrier for us. And I know we have to be politically savvy on how far we push this, but I think this is going to be a detriment to PPS and to communities around the state. So the more we can look at that cap, and if our voters want to do more to support our students, then I think we should allow them to do that.
Absolutely. Okay. We're moving right along here. We're clipping along. So,
I just called Jonathan to come on over.
oh, okay. So I can kick us off talking about safety and security updates. So there's Jonathan right there. So as I think everyone knows, the superintendent convened a meeting a week and a half ago here to urgently address our concerns about community violence and specifically the safety of our students. And this, we had the mayor, we had the county sheriff, county chair, head of county juvenile justice, community safety leader Mike Myers from the city, the U.S. attorney, the district attorney. So we had really all the entities in the room who are responding to these incidents, concerned about these incidents, and bringing forward resources to address these incidents. And so it was a really very productive conversation. And one of the key takeaways is just to improve our coordination with one another, since we're all operating in the same space without necessarily really strong channels of communication and collaboration. So there's some work being done at the staff level to try to figure out how to improve some of that regular communication. And then we're also looking at what kind of concrete steps we each can take, and also we can ask of each of these partners, because maybe it takes an external diagnosis of how things aren't working somewhere else to sort of start to push things, as well as our own internal examinations of what we could do better to serve our students. So we've kind of settled on 5 key areas that we're going to be addressing. And so, Jonathan, do you want to quickly go through those?
Sure. I'm going to probably miss a few since you counted 5. But I want to make sure.
Well, the last one is maybe a category unto itself. So there's really 4, and then the last one is a discussion of SRs.
Sure. Oh, good afternoon, directors and community. Yeah, so a few takeaways from that conversation that will require additional follow-up can be broken into a couple categories. The first one is around case management. What we learned and what we heard loud and clear from our partners, and what we've spoken about, is the need to coordinate efforts and share information about our students that are being impacted by this type of violence. Now we have FERPA, and we have other things that we have to work through, but the idea here is that we need to better coordinate with our community partners around supports. And I want to be very clear, it's around supports and supporting our young people through some of these issues. What we know is that, again, some relationships we know that a lot of our relationships are on the ground, but are not consistent. So how do we make sure that we're systematizing those relationships through a case management approach? So we will be engaging in a series of discussions, I think, around with our partners, whether it's our nonprofit partners, our city or county counterparts, about creating stronger connections when it comes to information about our students. Whether things happen over the weekends, that will impact how we need to respond as a school system on Monday when kids come back.
And let me just make clear that what we're talking about here is increasing our ability to keep our students safe and provide them with the support that they need. It is not about partnering with law enforcement to give them information they otherwise wouldn't have access to about our students and their activities and behaviors. It's very much focused on the well-being of our students.
That is absolutely correct, and thank you for emphasizing that, because you know, the last thing that we want as educators is to be complicit in to the prison, you know, school to prison pipeline. So very much appreciate you sharing that. Similar and aligned to the idea of supports, one of the things that we heard loud and clear from our counterparts is that we are all working. We all have resources around summer programming. We know that summer tends to be, you know, a high violent season here in the city, just looking at data. And so we talked about what does it look like to strategically align upstream, right? So making sure that our summer programmings are aligned. We began to talk about, you know, in follow-up meetings internally about what does it look like, again, in the spirit of case managing the students impacted by violence. You know, how do we coordinate, you know, summer programming, whether that's student jobs, whether that's internships, whether that is, you know, arts or sports, you know, giving kids opportunities to find things that ignite their spark.
Career technical training opportunities.
Correct.
Connected to job pathways.
And I think one of the things that we want to emphasize, you know, and I know that the board has spent a lot of this year having questions and wanting to talk about the experiences of our middle school students. So we talked about, you know, yes, the focus on high school, you know, for the students already, you know, maybe involved in some of these issues, but really coming down to the middle school level to say, how do we prevent, you know, and provide the supports at the middle school level. So this looks out, you know, so I'll be working with Lisa, and I haven't asked you this yet, but to map out a constellation of the funding that is out there, right? So again, we understand that the city and the county are investing in a number of nonprofits, and we are as well. So how do we make sure that we're not, you know, that there isn't double dipping, but that there is investments that are strategic and aligned, so that it gets spread out to support and impact more students.
This is probably the most urgent of the responses and one of the most concrete. So really getting a handle on all the resources being brought to bear on, you know, summer programming that is either specifically intended as violence prevention work or has an important intersection with violence prevention work. Figuring out, you know, who's investing, what are they doing, how can we work together, what's missing, and being able to look at all of that in one place.
That's right. I'm going to skip one, and then I'll end with that with around advocacy. But before I get to advocacy, I think there's some internal, just really quick internal updates around some of the work that we're doing. So obviously, I want to make sure that our community knows that we're not doing this in isolation. We are engaging, seeking input. Last week we met with school principals, campus safety agents. Next week we'll meet with students and families through focus groups. And the idea is to lift up from our stakeholders different recommendations that they see can improve safety, security of our campuses. So we're looking to address physical recommendations, people recommendations, systems recommendations as an example. How we're going to accomplish that. So again, we're bringing focus groups along, hearing from folks. We're also going to be engaging our classroom educators. We're bringing on a panel of experts. So if you recall, similar to our COVID-19 health panel, we've invited a number of national experts, including researchers, local leaders, to provide us recommendations and their expertise on the safety recommendations that we can make. And so our hope is to officially launch that next week. And then similarly, we are launching a task force of department heads and other leaders within PPS to to take all the information that we've gathered and lay out outline a set of recommendations that we as a school system can follow. Much of that, again, we will attempt to do with the resources that we have, but we know that resources are required and better partnerships. So this is where the last piece comes in, and I'll defer to Chair Constam about this, but really starting a coalition or advocacy with our city and county around the issues impacting Portland, right? And so what does it look like to go in together to Salem around a children's agenda, right? A children's agenda that is focused specifically on this topic and really identifying legislation that we can push for, that we can advocate for, and especially around funding. So we know that the city and the county have some legislative priorities that are aligned to our legislative priorities and vice versa. And so the idea would be for the board to take on that coalition to kind of name a children's agenda coalition that can work in tandem to support these priorities.
And I would just say that this is really more of a longer term agenda, but for this session, I think we can show up together in a more coordinated way around state investments in summer programming, because we're maybe not looking at just the intensely academic focused efforts that we as a district invested in last summer, but taking a broader view that includes how do we have a positive impact on this epidemic of youth violence, gun violence right now. So that this is something that we want to be actively engaged in the conversations around how that summer programming is directed or restricted, or if we're able to bump it up when we broaden the description of what we need to use it for to support our kids.
Yeah. So I'll end with this. I think really what I hope our community and our board hears is that we, and when I say we, the board and the entire staff, we are really committed to identifying real, concise, clear, tangible solutions to these issues. And while folks may right now hear we're working towards solutions, know that underneath that there's double clicks. As an example, right, we need to continue to work with or expand our relationship with the judicial system, our judges, to leverage how we support them when they, when some students are, involved with the juvenile justice system, that we could support around pretrial release or probation, as an example, right? So there are very tangible conversations to be had. It isn't all about resources, and it isn't all about alignment. Sometimes it is just about making sure that there is a connection, that the systems are talking to each other, so that ultimately the student, doesn't fall through the cracks, because that's where we know the students fall through the crack, when the systems are not talking to each other in a way that is in support of the child and the students that we serve.
And when we say systems, sometimes it can sound a little impersonal, but we know that some of the most effective people are those that are working on the ground, either we directly as part of our team for our school district, but also so many of our trusted community partners who have people working who are in relationship with our kids and who know them and who know who's vulnerable to violence and who knows who's teetering on the edge of being part of cycles of violence. So, and the city's investing even more money and investing in these kind of street level outreach workers, credible messengers. They get referred to by a lot of different names. So it's not just about sort of muckety mucks on Zoom or in a room. It's about who's really out there at our games and in our schools and in our neighborhoods, talking to kids and figuring out what they need to be on the right path.
Great.
So thank you.
Thank you.
I do feel hopeful about this work. And then the last piece is, I mean, you mentioned convening a task force, but the last piece is just about the very explicit conversations about school resource officers.
Absolutely.
And whether or not we do need some different kind of a police response to in our schools, and whether we do need some kind of a police presence restored in our schools, and if so, what that looks like. So we're doing a lot of focus groups on that with our educators, with our students, with our families. And that is a conversation that we are going to be pretty deep into in the next 2 months, and then come out with some recommendations around that. So that's obviously a very hot topic for our community. We have people who passionately believe they need to be reinstated tomorrow, and we have people who passionately believe that uniformed armed officers don't belong in our schools. So that's an important conversation, and my hope is that we really respect our students' voices in that process, and I think we're doing a good job to make sure that we hear from them. So that's what we got, right?
Great.
Okay, you guys keep us posted. Lisa, keep us posted on the I-5 shuffle. And we'll be back in a month.
Yes.
I just wanted to say one thing. I was at the Cleveland High School PTA meeting on safety the other night.
Yeah.
And I say that like Molly and all of our staff that were there, all of the like stakeholders, we had this panel of police and people from the city and all sorts of folks just speaking, Jonathan, exactly, or about the same things Jonathan was speaking about how we work together to support our students. And I think it's really important to remember that our students come in lots of ways to us, and that they're children. And I really appreciated that idea of a children's task force, that how can we provide the supports for all of our kids so that we can disrupt the violence that's happening. And there were some really powerful things that people said about that even just gathering and having these conversations is the first step in violence reduction. And it's not just like one thing is going to fix it. It's our community gathering and doing this work. So I'm really proud of PPS for being in this. And I know, Amy, you were part of that meeting a couple of weeks ago with some of those leaders. And it's really great. It's horrible that it's taken these acts of violence to get us here, but I'm really appreciative of the way that so many leaders are stepping up to lead at this time to really have those important conversations about how do we change the direction we're headed for a lot of our kids.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, if anybody joined us online, and we are adjourned.